that it could cure all diseases, that he had invented a device in which people sat. The device was about the size of a telephone booth, in which people sat and their libido was stimulated. And Reich was presented with this complaint. Despite Reich's clear insights that no one had had before, there was another side of Reich, which was he was naive. And it was amazing to hear some of his naivete when one knew that he had discovered such critical and crucial new material. So, with his naivete, Reich's answer to the complaint, essentially he would have had to go before a board and answer the complaint. Instead, he sent all of his books, the pile of his books, many of which were written before Orgone Energy was ever thought of, to the judge and said, read these books and you'll see that this is all lies. Well, obviously, the judge did not read all the books, and so pretty quickly, a judgment was issued against Reich, which said that all the written matter containing instructions for the use of any orgone accumulator device, all documents, bulletins, pamphlets, journals, and booklets, but not limited to those enumerated, shall be destroyed. And consequently, FDA agents came to Organon Reich's place in Maine, chopped up all the accumulators, piled all of the written matter into trucks, and delivered it to an incinerator in New York City, where it was burned. Now, I'm not sure of this, but I think that that is the only time in American history that the government has burned books. But all of Reich's literature was destroyed. Then there was a trial, which was held in Maine. And the trial, before the trial, we, the doctors, tried to enter into the case because Reich refused to have a lawyer. He wanted to defend his case himself. He ultimately hired a lawyer not to plead his case in court, but to consult on legal points in court. So he conducted his own defense, and it went like this. The judge said, or the prosecutor, who, by the way, the prosecutor in the case was a gentleman who had been Reich's lawyer in the beginning of his move to Maine. He had done all the paperwork in organizing the legal aspect of orgonomy. So, there was already a case to be made about the fact that the prosecutor had been Reich's lawyer. At the trial, the prosecutor would say, did you disobey this piece of the judgment against you? And Reich would say, yes, I disobeyed it because, and the judge would say, I don't want to hear because. We have only a very simple question. Did you or did you not disobey the injunction? And Reich said, I did. And over again, the same procedure. The prosecutor would read another piece of the complaint and question, did you disobey this? And Reich would say, yes, because, and the judge would say, I don't want to hear that. So it was a very clear, open and shut case in the eyes of the law, and Reich was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Those of us who knew Reich knew that putting Reich in prison was like putting an eagle in a cage, and we knew that there'd be very, very great hardship for a man with Reich's energy to be contained in a jail cell. And he died in jail just a few days before he would have been released, and he died of a heart attack. The legacy that Reich leaves us, those of us who do psychiatric organ therapy know in our bones how superior our therapy is to conventional therapies. We know that what we accomplish is, if one thinks in terms of atoms and quantum theory, we make a leap into a depth that no other therapy makes. We change in successful therapies. We're not a cure-all either. We change the depth of one's life. We also take care of symptoms, but our goal is to widen the pulse of one's life, and we usually succeed. As regards the scientific material, Reich was expelled from the German Psychoanalytic Society and invited to Norway by the Norwegian Psychoanalytic Society. So he lived in Norway for several years, and he met the same fate that Reich usually met, which was he gathered devotees and he gathered fierce enemies. And the Norwegian newspapers ran a series of articles. In Norway, Reich lived very closely with Leon Trotsky. They were very close friends. And the Norwegian papers would have headlines about the two Jews who were seeking to destroy Norwegian culture. In Norway, Reich began his biological experiments, and some of the top scientists in Norway were fascinated by it, and most were repelled by it. As regards life science, I know that I never saw in biology laboratories in college anything like what I saw in Reich Student Laboratory in Maine. Eventually, to be acceptable to standard science, there will have to be double-blind studies of large numbers of people, and people who are not sympathetic to orgonomy will have to see these phenomena